morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. A lot of news happening in the nation's capital. Why don't you take it away, Jess?
Lots and lots of news and lots of traffic because Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu landed in Washington Tuesday to less than a warm welcome. Pro-Palestine protesters staged a sit-in Tuesday afternoon to protest his visit. Yeah, the prompter is not strong. Demonstrators occupied the rotunda in the Cannon House office building on Capitol Hill. And though they were peaceful, Capitol Police arrested several people because demonstrations are not allowed in congressional buildings. Now, demonstrations sprouted outside the Watergate Hotel, too, where Netanyahu is staying. Law enforcement is leaving no stone unturned. Barricades have been erected around the Watergate hotels for days. The entire D.C. police force has been called on. Even the NYPD are helping, sending reinforcements.
Back on Capitol Hill, Democrats are divided on whether to attend Netanyahu's speech Wednesday afternoon. According to several reports, nearly 100 Democrats from both the Senate and the House are expected to skip Bibi's address.
No, I'm not.
I personally will be there when world leaders come to the People's Chamber. It's important that we hear their perspective.
Kamala Harris will also skip the speech, her office citing a scheduling conflict there. Netanyahu is set to meet President Biden and Harris after Congress. And of course, he will head to Mar-a-Lago Friday, Netanyahu will, to meet with Trump. In a Truth Social post, Trump wrote, "Looking forward to welcoming Bibi Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida." Trump wrote on Truth Social, "During my first term, we had peace and stability in the region, even signing the historic Abraham Accords, and we will have it again." Here to discuss all of this is White House columnist for The Hill, Niall Stanage. Welcome, Niall.
So, Niall, what can we expect? Is Netanyahu going to get arrested in the United States? I heard there's a warrant out for him.
I don't know that he's going to get arrested just yet. I mean, the ICC is seeking an arrest warrant for him. That process has to go through. There are people who have suggested making some kind of citizen's arrest, but I think it's unlikely to end up that way. And Speaker Johnson is threatening arrests from the other perspective. In other words, threatening to arrest people on the House floor if there are any disruptions there.
So for the last several days, there was some confusion as to whether Biden was going to meet with Netanyahu, whether he was available to do so. Led to speculation that, like, what is going on with him? Is he ill? Is it just that he's maybe feeling humiliated after what he's gone through over the last few days? Whether Harris declining to preside over the Congress proceeding for Netanyahu's visit. Should people be reading into that it's a snubbing of Netanyahu and it's an effort by Harris, who's now running a campaign for presidency, to signal to her base, her more anti-Israel base, that don't be upset with me. I'm hearing you. I don't want protests against. I don't want genocide Joe kind of rhetoric lobbed at me. You know,
anytime a politician cites prior commitments for not doing something, I think you always automatically raise an eyebrow about that or view it with some skepticism. Vice President Harris could have cancelled this engagement in Indiana if she wanted to. But I think that really the issue is she doesn't particularly want the visual of being behind Benjamin Netanyahu, who legitimately is seen by a lot of Democrats as a war criminal, or certainly an extremely right-wing figure. And to have her behind him while Republicans applaud his speech is not the political optics that she wants.
Now, this isn't always the case with how the foreign policy establishment works in Washington, but we're getting a lot of information from staffers. We had former staffers that resigned over Gaza saying they believe a Harris administration would be better than what we're getting from Biden. We also have a lot of staffers writing to their bosses in Congress saying, we want you to protest, we don't want you to go. What do you make of near 100 congressional Democrats refusing to go?
I think it is significant. I think it looks like this is going to be way beyond the last time there was a Democratic boycott of Netanyahu, which was back in 2015. To make a very long story short, he kind of stuck his oar in when Obama was trying to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran, and Democrats took exception to that. I think the visceral impact of what is happening in Gaza makes it even more likely that more Democrats will stay out of this. And I do think that your point is well made, Jess, about the staffers. I mean, we see not only support for protest, but we've seen people resign from the State Department and so forth in protest at the president's policies on Gaza.
Do we have any idea how Kamala Harris would handle this issue differently from Joe Biden? I'm seeing some maybe aspiration from progressives that she is going to be a little bit tougher on Israel than Joe Biden has been. I myself am skeptical of that because she does actually have ties to Israeli leadership, if not Netanyahu himself. Also, her husband is Jewish. Not that necessarily means she'll be pro-Israel or pro-Netanyahu, but I think it's a little bit of wishful thinking, but we don't know. Do you have any inclination of whether it'll be different at all?
I think there are people who want it to be different, but I think you have to squint pretty hard at her past positions to see real difference. It is true that she rhetorically seems to have made a greater acknowledgement of the suffering of the Palestinians. There has been the implication at times that she's more inclined to call for a ceasefire than Biden was, that she's maybe a little bit less comfortable with this language of ironclad support for Israel from the United States. But I don't think progressives should assume that this is going to be a sort of a free Gaza or free Palestine presidency if she were to be elected.
Now, it's strange to me that we have a foreign leader making a stop at the former president's residence, meeting with him. Of course, he's a front-running presidential candidate. It does seem weird to me. It seems like it's more so about their alignment of the global right than anything else. What do you make of him going to Mar-a-Lago?
One of the things I'd say about that, Jess, is that the personal relationship between Netanyahu and Trump is kind of weird, because on one hand, Trump is very, very pro-Israel, moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, had this quote-unquote peace plan that was so pro-Israel that the Palestinian Authority, a fairly comparatively moderate group, just refused at point blank within a few hours. But Trump has a real objection to the fact that Netanyahu quite promptly recognized Biden's victory in 2020, and their personal relationship has never really recovered from that. So I think it's largely about repairing those personal fences, and from Netanyahu's perspective, doing so with the expectation that obviously Trump could win in November.
Yeah, Trump has also been kind of vague about what his views of what's happening in Israel are, allowing with the understanding that, yes, he's been a very pro-Israel president, moving the embassy, et cetera, and that, many of his conservative supporters are, and including his vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, are wholly and fully on board with the Israeli effort to defeat Hamas. But Trump hasn't talked about it very much, and I think knows that it is dividing his opposition a little bit because there's so much dissatisfaction from progressives on what Biden is doing. He has been conspicuously quiet about it, maybe allowing people to project whatever they would prefer his policy to be onto him.
Yeah, I think that's true to a degree. The other thing about Trump, and whether this is a good or a bad thing is a different conversation, but he's so focused on the visuals of things and how they appear. I don't have the exact quote locked in my mind, but he said something to the effect that Israel has handled the PR side of it very badly, or the visuals of it have been very bad for Israel. Now, it's not quite clear whether he means and therefore they should stop, or whether he just means they shouldn't allow, footage of destruction and devastation in Gaza to be shown.
And we're at a point where there's divided support for Israel in the United States, but also divided support for Netanyahu back home, even within his own administration and the highest levels of government. He's also had a lot of struggles with foreign ties and trade relations. You have Colombia refusing to give them coal, which they greatly depend on for energy there in Israel, and also a depletion of weapons resources. So is Netanyahu coming here to beg? What does Bibi get out of this trip? I
think he's trying to solidify this idea of US support for Israel. But you're right. I mean, there's real question marks over that support in a whole lot of ways. Some Democrats, I should say, wanting the Biden administration to pause weapons completely. All the other sort of US civic society pressures on him. And the point that you make about Israel and about the hostage families is really important. Just a couple of days ago, I was down at the White House on some families of American citizens who are held hostage were speaking to reporters. And they were, at least by implication, quite critical of Netanyahu, because there is this sense among some, but not all, of the hostage families that he is kind of torpedoing a deal that would bring about a ceasefire and the release of hostages for his own political gain and for his own political survival in Israel. And that's an underrated element of importance in all this.
Speaking of policy, based on this visit, is there any hope that we could see movement on a deal to release hostages, to bring hostilities to an end? Is there going to be a diplomatic outcome here, or is this really just rah-rah, celebrate Netanyahu, show solidarity, that type of thing?
Normally, as you well know, when a foreign leader comes for these kind of visits, it is typically to announce or unveil some major change. Maybe Netanyahu will surprise us and do that, but there isn't a whole lot of sign of it so far. He is purportedly sending an Israeli team to continue these negotiations on Thursday, but I mean, I think there's always been an enormous question about whether Netanyahu himself really does back this proposal that the Biden administration keeps insisting is an Israeli proposal.
Thanks so much for coming on, Niall. It's always good to get your insight as you witness all of these historical events firsthand. Thank you for traveling around for the Hill, and we've got more Rising after this.
Did the Democratic Party use undemocratic means to remove its presidential candidate, Joe Biden, and replace him with Kamala Harris? Here's Republican Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton on CNN with Josh Berman Tuesday. Let's see what he had to say.
You used the language coup, and again, you've never said that for January 6th, and as far as I know, no cops were beaten up, no one defecated in the Capitol, there was no criminal trespass in terms of changing the Democratic candidates, were there?
Well, no, but what you get with Kamala Harris is a failed prosecutor who wouldn't seek the death penalty for cop killers, even though her fellow San Francisco Democrat Dianne Feinstein wanted to.
So he didn't directly answer that question. But meanwhile, journalist Michael Shellenberger has posted a video on X in the hours following Biden's exit announcement castigating the Democratic Party for installing Harris in Biden's stead in the 2024 race. Let's watch.
But the party undermined the spirit of democracy in every election. Democracy at its core is about letting the people decide for themselves. That didn't happen. In fact, a very small number of Democratic Party donors and media elites chose Hillary Clinton, Biden, and Harris. Nobody could watch the events of the last few weeks and believe that the Democratic Party is democratic. It's a party controlled by the media, donors, and the deep state. However one feels about the GOP, the same can't be said for Republicans. Republican voters rejected their own party leaders, donors, and the foreign policy establishment to nominate Trump for president in 2016.
Shellenberger called out Democrats again on Tuesday. Let's look.
The war on democracy led by Democrats, the press, and the deep state has in this way ultimately helped Trump gain support. At the same time, it's left Democrats without good options to defeat him. By favoring woke racialist politics over a substantive political platform, and by selecting nominees in an anti-democratic process for 3 presidential elections in a row, Democrats have been left with an extremely weak candidate.
Here to discuss what's unfolding in the presidential race is Michael Shellenberger. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Robbie.
Always a pleasure. So I agree with you, but I want to let you lay out the case. You know, we've been going back and forth on this all week. I do think it's not. I'm not making the claim that it was illegal or some kind of law was violated. The Democratic Party is a sort of a private organization that can pick its candidate however they want. And in olden times, it was not done democratically on either side, Republican or Democrat. There was a smoke-filled room where they decided who the best candidate was. Now that's kind of how they're doing it now, and I do think that flies in the face a little bit. Is in tension with their stated values of saying we're the ones who uphold democracy.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, it's called the Democratic Party. And so the most important part of democracy is the people choose. And that is not happening here, obviously. So we're seeing, and it's a pattern. As we saw in 2016, that the DNC manipulated both its spending and also other aspects of that race to favor Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. So extreme that Donna Brazile, a DNC leader, condemned it later. In 2020, you saw party elders moved Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar out of the primaries so that Bernie Sanders could split the vote with Elizabeth Harris. Elizabeth Warren, and Biden could get the nomination. And now here we see a situation where the Democratic primary voters are not choosing Kamala Harris. There was no moment in which they're choosing him. We thought maybe there would be a divide in the party and that you would see this conflict resolve at the DNC, Democratic National Convention, in August. And Obama, I guess, is still holding out. I think to his credit, it's something that should be decided by Democratic primary voters. If that's impossible, then at least by the delegates, to have some sort of democratic process. And that's not happening. So I just think one of the questions is, how did a party that was so committed to questioning authority, to fighting the man — this is the Democrats of the 80s and 90s that I was raised with — how did it go to becoming, so deferent to authority and so committed to these kind of backroom tactics?
Now, this was a ticket, Harris was on it, that got 81 million votes, the most ever in American history. This is a candidate that someone voted for. She's an incumbent. She's on the ticket. It was a popular decision. 65% of Democrats wanted Joe Biden to step down. Typically, what we see with a coup is that a sitting leader is deposed by a new leader, and that is not a decision that's popularly backed by the people. So I'm curious about the decision to use the word coup and how you see this as somehow different and more so a coup than January 6th.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree with you. I think the word coup is too strong, and it's not a word that I've used. And so that's not the word I would use. Although I would point out, by the way, that it's not correct to say that all coups are unpopular. In fact, we've seen in many situations, I mean, one I'm familiar with is the Brazilian military coup. It was popular at first. And so the idea that a coup is only something unpopular, I don't think is true. And look, I think that we have a process. If the president steps down, then it makes sense that the vice president takes the president's role. That's in the Constitution. That's something that we all understand. That's what she was elected to be, was the vice president. She was never nominated to be the president, to be the Democratic presidential candidate. And so then there's this idea, well, Joe Biden will simply pass the torch, but that's not a democratic process. In other words, you can't say, oh, because the people elected Joe Biden and then he then goes and appoints Kamala Harris, that his appointment is democratic. It's bureaucratic. And so, I mean, at a minimum, there should be some open process at the convention. It's the perfect place to have an open process, to have a debate about this. And to be fair, I don't think that I'm not the only person pointing this out. I was happy to discover that Black Lives Matter, which is an organization I mostly disagree with, also holds this view. I think that many actually on the left of the Democratic Party, the more anti-establishment left wing of the Democratic Party, is also bothered by this. So, I think coup is too strong, but I think that there's a lot of space in between something being a coup and being democratic.
Yeah, the complicating factor here is that Biden did not have a really robust base of support in the first place. I mean, he did win. The process to make him the nominee this time around was something of a sham. There was not a competitive primary held. They didn't do debates. It was set up to be a coronation because their view is, well, he's the incumbent president, and the incumbent president doesn't get a real primary challenge situation, even though this is kind of an unprecedented situation because he's so old and people are concerned about that and voters were concerned about that. And a majority of Democrats were concerned about that in the first place, continued up until he stepped aside to think somebody else should be the candidate. So I think it's not like the actual wishes of the Democratic base have necessarily been betrayed in having Biden no longer be the candidate. But at the same time, nor is their will for Kamala Harris being expressed. Does that make it's like it was undemocratic how we got here, and it's undemocratic how we're getting out of it. So it's not quite like, right, if Republican elites somehow finagled it so that Trump was not the candidate, that would be a massive betrayal of a base that is full-throatedly, whole hog, totally in support of Donald Trump. In this case, it's like, well, people did actually want a different candidate. We're just arriving at a different candidate through the donors and the elites choosing to have a different candidate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. And I think that, so you sort of see two problems here. First is that simply anointing Kamala Harris is neither consistent with the spirit of democracy or the letter of democracy, in the sense that, I mean, I voted for Biden in 2020. It was the last year of my life I was a registered Democrat. I changed my affiliation the following year. But part of the sell, I think everybody remembers, is that Biden was going to be a transitional, stabilizing figure, and that remember one of his first press conferences in 2021, reporters were hounding him about whether he would run for re-election again. The idea that somehow his age only became a concern after the debate is just not the case. It was a huge concern before that. So I think a lot of people with goodwill, they said, well, we'll give Biden, a sort of a transitional period, and then we'll move on to a process of choosing somebody, having a proper primary. That didn't happen this year. That this would have been the right time to have a proper primary. That didn't happen. So both the letter of the law, so to speak, and the letter of choosing directly of registered Democratic voters and, being able to select their candidate, that simply didn't happen this year. And I think a really interesting question is why is it that the Democrats, which had been the party of liberalism and the party that really affirms the liberal democratic process, why have they been so willing to go along with the establishment and the elites in the party, both the media elites, the donor elites? And, I point out, again, I'm saying this as a former Democrat and independent, the Republicans rejected the party elite. They rejected the Republican establishment to go with a populist candidate in the form of Donald Trump. After significant efforts to get him out of there, they continued to go with Trump. So I do think what's sort of maybe we haven't talked enough about, it's not remarked upon enough, is just the ways in which the Republican Party has come to embody, and I think it's that libertarian wing, that populist wing, has embraced a kind of anti-establishment ethos, whereas you've seen the Democrats just continue to double down on a more pro-establishment process and candidate.
Now, Michael, when someone's on a ticket, a presidential ticket, and they're getting the most votes ever given to a ticket before, it's assumed that whoever's the vice president would be the president upon Joe Biden stepping down or what have you. Now, they're the incumbent ticket, and 65% of Democrats wanted this to happen, wanted Joe Biden to step aside. And at this point, holding a primary would be very difficult, an open primary. There was an open primary. And in 2020, to get Biden on the ticket, yes, I worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign. It was unfortunate, but it was representative of the majority of the party being more aligned with the establishment Democrats. We did not have the numbers for Bernie Sanders to win unless the establishment Democrats split the ticket. So to protect their ideology and their faction within the party, they came together and supported Biden. That was what happened democratically within the party, whether we like it or not. And of course, parties get to decide who the candidate will be. That is what is legal under our current democratic structure. I think to say that this isn't democracy when this is legally how our democracy runs is a bit of a stretch, because I haven't heard anyone in the Democratic Party complain about this and say, this was a coup, we should have an election, this was something that is undemocratic, because what we're worried about is jeopardizing our democracy in a way that Donald Trump does, which is forbidding the checks and balances in our government, which is something entirely different. This is someone that 81 million people voted for to potentially be president and to serve at the highest office in the administration besides Joe Biden's presidency. So I don't see how this is undemocratic, and to me it feels a little dishonest coming from people outside of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can see that point. I mean, I think, though, that you have to remember there is still a party convention coming up. It would have been a perfect time and place to have that conversation. I think Democratic voters are more than capable of having spent several weeks hearing from different candidates, having it culminate in the Democratic National Convention, having a vote there. I mean, that is how the party used to select candidates. I think it's not right to just point to polling saying, oh, a majority of Democrats wish to have Kamala Harris as their candidate. A poll is not the same thing as an election. It's not the same thing as a process. There is democratic processes that need to occur. And that is actually the tradition in the United States to have those. Like I said, I think there's nothing illegal about it. I certainly haven't used the word coup. I think that's far too strong. But at the same time, I don't think this really represents a kind of democratic process by any means. You really didn't have an open primary earlier this year for Biden. There really wasn't a chance for a fair competition between candidates. And look, I think the consequences are clear, which is that the Democrats are left with a candidate who is not strong. I pointed out in those articles that I did that Kamala Harris was really quite coddled as a candidate her entire political career. First, she was appointed to statewide positions by her boyfriend at the time, Willie Brown, a major politician in California. She then cruised through to becoming an elected district attorney, attorney general, senator without having significant competition. It's sort of a classic case of coddling where when you coddle somebody, they're not battle hardened, they're not strengthened, they haven't faced that adversity for the real world. And I think you're left down with a candidate who speaks in platitudes, who often appears to be constantly trying to figure out what to say so she doesn't get in trouble rather than what to do. And this latest thing is with this idea of whether or not she was really in charge of the border. Turns out, I mean, we're going to call about it now, she actually had broader responsibilities. It was to stem the root causes of the migration crisis. So to now see her and her allies in the media suggest that somehow she didn't have a significant role when it came to the migration crisis, I just think speaks to the unwillingness to take responsibility for the powers that she's had, the extraordinary powers she's had her political career, and never wielded with any authority or vision, and is now in a position where she's competing for specifically that role of visionary and commander in chief.
I think it goes to show you the kind of media coverage she's going to get, where Axios today, to your point, saying that, oh, she was never officially the border czar, what are you talking about? And then immediately Community noted with all the time, there's 3 separate times they referred to her in Axios as the border czar.
Now, you can make a deliberate decision to not listen to her speeches where she is talking about policy positions. She's so far given 3 speeches over the last week where she's focused on policy. You had Biden himself say, when he hadn't stepped down yet, at the convention, delegates can go and vote for whoever they want. That's how our process works. That was before he endorsed Harris. We're still having a democratic process at the convention. Delegates get to choose who they pledge for, and I'm just not convinced this is anything more than people afraid of Kamala Harris doing very well and being a real threat to Trump.
But some people I'm afraid of her not doing very well because she's not been tested, but we'll have to leave it there. Michael Shellenberger, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
If you think you are seeing green, you are, because it's BRAT summer, and the green color of the Charli XCX album, BRAT, is overtaking the internet, for those of you who don't already know. Memes are exploding all over TikTok, Instagram, and X, and young voters are rallying behind who many of them are calling the BRAT, Kamala Harris. Now, the term BRAT was coined by the artist Charli XCX in her summer album BRAT, which encourages female empowerment, confidence, and trying to enjoy life as much as possible despite the struggles one might be facing or living in a troubled social and political climate. And on Sunday, after Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential race, Charli XCX herself tweeted, "Kamala is BRAT," so we have confirmation. And now this led to a firestorm of Kamala Harris BRAT videos and coconut tree memes just taking over social media, inspired by the speech Harris gave, saying, quote, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you."
See what can be, what should be, unburdened by what has been.
Hi, it's me, you're all in danger. Never getting back because I'm such a hater. Got my finger on the detonator. Crazy girl shit, gonna go spring breakers. Every time I make it so outrageous. Always gonna listen to people playing safer. 4, 3, 2, 1, see you later. Crazy girl shit, gonna go spring breakers. Gonna go spring breakers.
Harris HQ has even incorporated the BRAT meme into their own campaign strategy to get Kamala elected in November.
they're posting and probably going to be posting the content that Kamala could never post on her own, but labeling them as this like separate entity of her, so it's not coming directly from her brand and her as a person, is genius. She knows exactly what she's doing.
Now, even t-shirts are being made. BRAT's Kamala shirt is already on Fire Island. The gays move so fast, one posted.
X-users are also sharing a photo of the character Coconut Head from the popular 2000s Nickelodeon show Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, which I've not seen, although I have seen some memes from it that I really do like. Others have photoshopped Kamala's face onto pop artist Chappelle Roan. Is that how I say that, Jess?
Chapel.
Okay. And are calling her, I can't even read that. Kamalanomenon. Wow. Planned words from the pop artist song Feminomenon. Thank you. But some on the right are not taking well to this social media zeitgeist, saying this country doesn't need a brat, it needs a parent.
We don't need a brat in this moment, we need a parent. Okay, the border's open, inflation's through the roof, the price of gas has doubled. Brats did this, a brat attitude of like, I'll get to it when I get to it, we're just here living our truth. Okay, there's only the truth, as you know, and the truth is the country's a mess.
Wait, hold on.
This is a thing. It's supposed to be a sell that she's considered sort of incompetent.
Boring, old, negative 1,000 aura points, don't like it.
No, that's my dear friend Jimmy Failure, and I agree with him. Look, we had this discussion of what BRAT is and what it means yesterday. I also got some schooling in this from some of my younger colleagues at Reason Magazine. And there's been, so this has hit the whole understanding of BRAT and the cultural moment has now, like the wave has crashed or crested or whatever, so that we all have to discuss this for the next week or whatever. The Free Press, Barry Weiss's Free Press, had an article about this from my friend Kat Rosenfeld, who is a really good processor of pop culture trends and what they mean for politics. So I'm just going to read what she wrote about it. She says, the best summary of bratdom might come from my Free Press colleague River Page, who quips, "Brat girl summer is just women acting like gay guys." Charlie XCX describes the quintessential brat as just that girl who's a little messy and maybe says dumb things sometimes, who feels herself, but then also maybe has a breakdown and parties through it. It's honest, blunt, and volatile. Why would you want to associate a presidential candidate with this, with a steady diet of self-regard and cocaine in slime-colored clothing?
Well, those people don't understand culture. That's not what Brat Summer is. This is the right and right-leaning people coping with the girls, gays, and theys winning the culture war, quite frankly. You have Fox News giving commentary on Brat Summer, using brat language to make political points. We've already won. They look ridiculous and silly. This is the youth vote decidedly saying, we are on the left. And that's what this is. And they're going to cope with this however they may. And it's very fun to watch everyone misunderstand what Brat is about and try and make sense of it.
I don't think I'm misunderstanding what it is. I'm just questioning. It seems forced.
Well, that is not what it is.
It seems forced to me to apply it to Kamala Harris.
Women acting like gay guys, that is not descriptive of the Brat movement whatsoever. The girls, gays, and theys have always been
that's what you said.
A cultural group. It's not girls acting like gays.
Well, we all have, everybody has their own culture. The people you're talking about are often defining culture at the most elite levels, yes.
It's not the most elite levels. Brat Summer is not, it has nothing to do with being elite. The album is able to stream for free.
What does it have to do with being left?
Do we think Jeff Bezos is jamming out to Charlie XCX? No, Robbie.
He might be, I don't know.
White straight men run the country. Those are the elites.
Boy.
The girls, gays, and theys are the elites. That's what you're going with?
Straight men run the country.
Oh, this is such a fun moment and a fun cope. So the Brat movement, you'll see like these like green haze over the videos, and you'll see videos like the ones we showed of Kamala Harris. It's called a fan cam usually, and so it's got the Brat Summer music. We've also had Feminomenon, which is a music like theme about women having power. It comes from a Chappell Roan song. That's why Kamalanomenon is a thing. And it's about women empowerment and how we need a movement of women because we've lived in a society mostly run by men for a very long time, and look how it's going, not so well. So that's what it's about, really.
But what this sounds to me like is Hillary Clinton girl boss feminism once again.
No, because...
But how is it different?
Because Hillary Clinton herself is very cringe. Kamala's a woman of culture.
Kamala's not cringe?
She is fun aunt energy. Hillary Clinton has annoying neighbor lady who calls the police. It's more Karen energy. It's very, very different. And Hillary Clinton saying Pokemon go to the polls, that wasn't even a thing before she said it. And this is also people...
Management wants to... HR wants you to find the difference between these two photos. They're the same photo.
It's organic. Hillary Clinton trying to cater to the youth is very different than the youth embracing Kamala Harris, because it's about more than just BRAT and just Chapel Roan. It's about they actually support her candidacy and her policies. There are people making videos with millions of views about stuff she did as Attorney General.
What are her views? What does she stand? I don't know what she stands for.
She's proposed lowering taxes for the middle and working class, raising pay for teachers. She supports a public option for health care, at least she did in 2020 when she was the Attorney General. And they were pushing for the overturning of Proposition 8. She was the first person to call and say, start the marriages now. When someone who was transgender, who was put in prison in California, she went and visited them in prison and made sure they had the care they need personally. This is a woman who cares about people, and Gen Z has seen that. While she's been painted as someone who's a figure of the establishment, she has the hope of embracing a progressive agenda.
I would be very hesitant about casting her as some beloved Gen Z cultural icon in day 3 of her candidacy. I'm sure she does have fans among the cultural thought leaders, the group of people you're describing. That they're behind her is going to be no surprise, because they're going to be behind the Democratic leader, period. But whether she has a broader... Is her if her numbers are better than Biden's among young people, we'll see. Well, her numbers overall.
No, among young people, yeah.
Okay, we'll see. More Rising right after this.
The youth vote that was fast asleep when 2 old men were running for president seems to be waking up. Many Gen-Zers who were planning to sit this year's election out are all of a sudden throwing their support towards Kamala Harris and showing it on social media. Tweets of 20-something-year-olds rallying behind Kamala are being shared on X like wildfire. My name is Olivia Juliana. I'm 21 years old and I'm supporting Kamala Harris in 2024. Who's with me? My name is Harry Sisson. I'm 21 years old and I'm fully supporting Vice President Kamala Harris in 2024. Who's with me? And so on and so forth. People in this voting age group are also the ones behind the memes that are currently taking over the internet involving BRAT, coconut trees, and a wide array of TikTok sounds.
I'm looking for a man in finance, the trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes, finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes, finance, the trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes, finance, trust fund.
360, when you're in the mirror, do you know what you see?
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
I'm so Julia.
You exist in the context.
666 with a princess tree. I'm everywhere, I'm so Julia.
Of all in which you lived and what came before you.
While BRAT edits and coconut tree memes are allegedly making Kamala Harris relatable to some people, already securing the endorsements of celebrities like Ariana Grande and Charlie XCX, how relatable. The first person to call Kamala BRAT, she also seems to be aligned with Gen Z on some of the issues that matter to progressives, including being an advocate for abortion rights, gun control, and fighting climate change. Gen Z for Change, the nonprofit advocacy group that uses social media to promote civil action among members of Gen Z, endorsed Vice President Harris on Sunday, writing in a statement, Gen Z for Change will be dedicated to mobilizing young voters in support of Vice President Kamala Harris. Deputy Executive Director of Gen Z for Change, Victoria Hammett, joins us now to discuss.
Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
Thanks for coming up.
Thank you for joining us. So, what do you make of the candidacy of Kamala Harris? Is it true that young people are going to be more interested in her than they were in Joe Biden? And does that have to do with just the fact that she is, she comes across as centuries younger, is more dynamic and capable of speaking? Is there really policy differences that appeal more to the youth vote?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I feel like it was evident that young voters did not want Joe Biden to be the nominee. I think that this was evident not only through the uncommitted primary vote movement, but also in polling that we saw before Biden withdrew. So in response to Biden withdrawing from the race, I think we're seeing immediate excitement from young voters. It seems like there's a lot more hope right now than there was even just a week ago. But at the same time, young voters really care about policy. And so we are all eagerly anticipating Kamala Harris's agenda, what policies she's going to be running on.
A lot of people have their eyes on Gaza and what Kamala says. She was one of the early people in the administration that was critical of Israel's treatment of people in Gaza, and then was asked to kind of reel that in. A lot of the staffers that left the administration over Gaza said that a Harris administration would be better. A lot of people are looking to the Netanyahu visit and seeing what she says coming out of this as an indicator. She's already refused to preside over Congress. But I think the first test of Gen Z's influence and manifesting Kamala as being more progressive will likely be the VP pick. How do you see this influencing the momentum that she has? Could it stop it if maybe she picks someone like Shapiro?
That is a fear of mine personally, is that we could lose this momentum right now if she were to choose Shapiro as her vice president pick. My personal preference would be someone like Andy Beshear, because unfortunately Shapiro has been incredibly vocal, not only being against people who are supporting Gaza, but against student protesters specifically. And these student protesters are a huge portion of the youth voting bloc. So I think if she were to pick Shapiro as her vice president, we would certainly lose momentum from the youth vote there.
So a Quinnipiac poll from July 19th, the period of July 19th to July 21st, had Kamala Harris actually running, getting slightly less of the youth vote than Biden versus Trump. Now that poll is a little bit of an outlier. There are others showing her, and that poll had her actually losing the youth vote to Trump. Other polls have her somewhere between 16 percentage points and 3 percentage points above Trump, which is still well short of how Biden performed with, we're talking about, voters under 35 in the general election in 2020. So I'm wondering if Kamala Harris actually is energizing the youth. Donald Trump has been doing surprisingly well in polls with groups that are historically in support of Democrats, not just young people, but also minorities, black people, Latino voters, etc. Major inroads are being made by the Republicans. Is Kamala Harris, right now we're in a moment where there could be any candidate, if they're all getting behind Harris, it's going to be Harris, but you could have had a Democratic convention, an open convention, where someone who maybe is even more appealing to the youth emerges, and yet the process, what's happening is a total consolidation behind her candidacy. Is that the best idea?
I completely understand why some people wanted an open convention. Unfortunately, I think that type of chaos this late in the election cycle could have also put off a lot of voters. In regards to polling data, specifically surrounding the youth vote in regards to Harris, I think it's important to remember that her candidacy is still very young. She's been the official presumptive nominee for a very short period of time now, so a lot can change. I will say one thing that conservatives are doing that I think Democrats should take note of is using social media to their advantage. Donald Trump went on Logan Paul's podcast, and given that Democrats are also struggling with the young male vote specifically, I think that Republicans engaging with social media in a way that they haven't previously is something that Democrats should pay attention to and learn from and use social media in a similar way.
Can you talk a little bit about what Gen Z for Change is doing? And for context, in 2020, Gen Z for Change, by different name, was a major actor in the election. We saw the youth vote increase by 11 points from 2016 compared to 2020, with 50% of 18 to 29-year-olds turning out. It was huge. How much of this do you think has to do with social media and the organizing on it? And what does Gen Z for Change have planned this time around?
Social media is a fantastic tool to reach young voters, to reach any voters, but young voters specifically. I remember the days of TikTok for Biden. There was definitely a lot of excitement around the 2020 election, excitement that we were previously saying as of a week ago, we were not seeing with this election. And so I think the increase in conversation surrounding this election on social media is definitely something to take note of, given that it is such a powerful tool to reach young voters. And I hope that the campaign uses social media to their benefit. I think a lot of notable Democrats use social media very well. AOC is someone who comes to mind, someone who uses social media to speak directly to voters. And I hope that the campaign takes note of that.
What do you have names for what kind of VP, if not Josh Shapiro, would be appealing to the youth vote?
Yeah, my personal preference would be someone like Andy Beshear. I think that him coming from Kentucky, him being able to speak to a part of the country that doesn't typically align with Democrats is really powerful. I also think that his track record as governor, always being a strong ally to the LGBTQ plus community, always standing firm in his pro-choice beliefs, is pretty significant and can definitely be an asset to Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I think on a debate stage with J.D. Vance, I would love to see Beshear point out this movement we've seen on social media as well. He's not from here, in reference to being from Kentucky. He's not like us. They're saying he washes his cast iron pan. He doesn't understand what everyday life is like in Appalachia. I think people want to see that as well, but we've also seen Gen Z care a lot more about policy than previous younger generations, almost by, force, because we're inheriting this economy where it seems like we're worse off than our parents. And we've had people, Kamala herself, say that she wants, young girls to have more rights than their mothers, not less. And we're seeing the unfortunate opposite of that becoming a reality in a lot of states. Can you speak to some of the policy issues that you want to see the Harris campaign focus on to really win the youth vote?
Totally. Well, as we've already talked about, Gaza is going to be incredibly important for the youth vote. We need an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, first and foremost. Obviously, abortion is an issue that matters a lot to young people. Same with LGBTQ plus rights. But one thing that I don't think we put enough emphasis on is how much Gen Z really does care about fiscal policy as well. This generation is incredibly supportive of labor unions. I think it's a really good sign that many major labor unions have already endorsed Kamala Harris. And so that's something that the campaign should definitely be focusing on as well.
Thank you so much for coming on, Victoria. We really appreciate it. Happy BRAT summer.
Awesome. Happy BRAT summer. Thank you.
Biden will be speaking tonight for the first time since he dropped out of the race on Sunday. In the meantime, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was on The View. Let's watch.
This insanity of a news cycle where people go, he's got to go, he's too old, he's too much. Where was your head when you are hearing people go at him like this as he's recovering from COVID at the same time?
So, look, this has been an interesting couple of weeks, to say the least. But what has always been the case is it's always been a privilege and an honor for me to represent this president of the United States and be the White House press secretary for this president.
Right.
And at the end of the day, when you think about what he has done the last 4 years, when you think about who he has been as a human, as a person, by the time we're done, by the time we run through the finish line at the end of January, he would have done more than most presidents have done in 8 years. He would have done more in 4 years. And what we saw from this president the last couple of days was a human decency, a good man, someone who decided not to put himself first, like we've seen before, but to put the American people first and this country first.
Joy Behar also asked Karine Jean-Pierre whether Biden felt personally betrayed by the Democrats who had pushed him out. Let's watch her response.
Does he understand that it was for the country also?
I mean, look, he's going to speak tomorrow. We'll hear from him directly, and I think he'll address whatever is on his heart. Like you said, he has a big heart. He understands where people are. He understands having done this 36 years as a senator, 8 years as vice president, and now almost 4 years as president. He gets it. He gets where we are as a country. Let's not forget, there's a lot at stake.
And then she called J.D. Vance, the vice presidential candidate on the Republican side, she called him ridiculous for saying that Biden couldn't finish his term out. Let's watch.
So listen, there have been a lot of criticisms about if the White House was transparent enough about Biden's health in the months leading up to the debate. But now calls have gone further, including vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance saying if he's not up to serving 4 more years, can he serve out the rest of his term? How do you respond to that?
I think that's ridiculous. Seriously.
He's ridiculous.
Not me. But what I will say is, like, the president decided to not run for re-election. That's it. That's all he decided on. He wants to continue to do the work. 3.5 years of unprecedented historic work. I think that shows what he's capable of doing. I think that shows how important his leadership is. And moments ago, I talked about how he was able to reach across the aisle and do things in bipartisanship in the political environment that we're in. We have so much more work to do, and he understands that. He's going to speak to this in about 24 hours or so, and he'll lay that out. But this president is ready to continue to lead this country in a historic way.
Alyssa always manages to make the conservative point in, I think, the kindest to the guest, to the liberal guest way possible. I'm going to be less kind to Karine Jean-Pierre here. Look, she's been complicit in a massive cover-up for I don't even know how long now. What's the point of interviewing her? She's not an honest actor. She has been exposed as a liar and a propagandist for saying that it was manipulated and they're trying to trick you into thinking Joe Biden is too old and too out of it. That's what she was doing up until the debate. She must have known. She has enough. She can't have plausible deniability because she's so proximate to Joe Biden. She's so involved in his life for the entire time she's been press secretary. So she knew she had the thankless task, the impossible job of pretending that he was still capable of going through the motions of the campaign and the presidency when he was clearly not. Now we all know it. And so she's just been caught that her job was to lie on his behalf, which sucks for her, but is what she was doing, and there's no way around that. She is complicit in a massive effort to shield from the American people and many in the media that Biden could no longer be the candidate, and Democrats should be mad at her about it because now they're in a situation where I know you think she's going to turn out to be a great candidate, and we'll see if that's the case. They're in a position where they have a candidate who is, in my view, utterly untested in the national stage because they've had to swap out Biden at the last moment. And if it had been clearer to people that he was not able to do this for longer, there might have been time to, actually have people choose a new candidate instead of what's happening.
Yeah, I am manifesting Kamala Harris being a better candidate than Joe Biden. Thanks for noticing, Robbie. But no, I think Karine Jean-Pierre, like any press secretary, has a job to do. And I never expect a press secretary to be honest or go against the president, ever.
Sure,
they're employed to be a mouthpiece. So I just never expect truth from people like Karine Jean-Pierre. That's why I make these press conference skit videos making fun of how much they're a mouthpiece for, in the case of Biden, his campaign, his administration. In the case of John Kirby, a mouthpiece for Israel. They all have their different roles as press secretaries. And I just don't have a lot of respect for any of them because I think it's the worst job in politics. You're running cover for people usually doing horrible things, and you have to take the fall for all of it. But Jen Psaki's doing well. She has a career in media now, like a lot of former press secretaries do, but it's really the worst job in politics.
Jumped right from one to the other without anyone in the media saying there was anything improper or inappropriate about that. And it's true that commonly happens. She's not at all the first person to do that. It is typical for a press secretary, for an administration on both sides, to land on their feet in cable news. That happens all the time. Of course, there was a huge freak out. This is so many news cycles ago now, I barely even, and by that I mean it probably happened last week, but so much happens I barely even remember the details of it. But remember Romney McDaniel, the RNC chair, got offered a contributor deal on, I can't even remember now if it was CNN or MSNBC, and everyone went ballistic and freaked out and prevented that from happening because what if she's going to be talking about, she was so close to the administration, so she's just going to be, lobbying on their behalf or something. Well, Jen Psaki negotiated her deal to join MSNBC while she was still in the administration. So it's just, bad faith kind of performative outrage. But yeah, I agree with you. It's not really unique to Karine Jean-Pierre. It's a terrible job. I don't know why anyone would want to do it.
Yeah.
Being a mouthpiece for the administration. You can't say, yeah, my boss is wrong, we're being untruthful with you. No, you got to spin it to be favorable to the administration. That's the job. But she happens to have been caught because she said that it was manipulated images. Remember the cheap fake videos? That these videos you're seeing of Biden looking disoriented, wandering off, and some of them were cropped in a way, or cut in a way that was maximally unfavorable to him. And I noted that when we talked about it on the show. I said, yeah, this one doesn't show that he's actually going to look at something or whatever. But one of them was where where Barack Obama has to kind of help him off the stage at that donor event. That was one of the ones that said it was manipulated. That's the event, the George Clooney event, where he concluded that, oh my God, Joe Biden is really out of it. And everyone who interacted with Joe Biden thought that. And they continued to not say anything about it. And Karine Jean-Pierre continued to lie about it until it became impossible to do so. So I really don't. I mean, they were far too nice to her, which is, not surprising. They're very, very partisan, very in the tank against Trump. So she shouldn't have. That's probably the only show she wants to do, because The View is where you're going to get the nicest treatment if you're a Democrat. But it's just utterly inexcusable at this point.
Yeah, I expect the truth from journalists, not from mouthpieces of administrations. I do think there is a point to, like Joe Biden potentially doing one job instead of two is manageable in his current state. I think someone could argue that, but I don't think we've seen enough of Joe Biden candidly, without a prompter, not in a controlled setting, to really say. Yeah,
I've seen enough. I absolutely don't.
We don't know what he's like in meetings. I think it's probably not good. I know people who have met with him in the White House who have said this for years, to be honest with you. And that's scary. And I think I have concerns that he's commander-in-chief right now. But I just don't think there's any winning for Democrats in the eyes of the right. It's a coup. How is Kamala the leader of the party? The elites picked her. All of this stuff. Simultaneously, they're pushing the 25th Amendment, trying to push the president out of office. So do you want him in office or do you not? If he stepped aside and put Kamala in there, they would say they're just doing this so they have incumbency, right? There's every way you can spin it. No winning there.
Sure. I mean, Republicans are trying to spin the situation to their advantage. But I don't think it is crazy at all. In fact, I so much don't think it's crazy. I agree with it to say that, look, if he's not physically and cognitively capable of running for president, he should not be president right now. And this isn't like an abstract trying to guess what his state is. Like, we saw him in the debate. We've seen him subsequently in interviews where they went slightly better than the debate, but not all that well. He has not inspired faith that he can stick this out. And he's admitting on some level that he can't do it because he agreed to step aside. The Democrats don't think he can do it. So then you have to get in this place where you're saying, well, he's capable right now, but we're making but what we're saying is we don't think, years from now, by the end of his second term he would serve, he wouldn't be capable then. No, it's the people don't think he's capable now and that he might not be alive in that many years. Like, that's what the concern is. Or that you have to say that, well, he's capable of being president or running the country, but the extra stress of campaigning is too much for him. I don't think that's setting anyone at ease. But yeah, Republicans are going to say whatever they're going to say about it. I think they're right to say that. I think they're right to say that there are serious questions. And the 25th Amendment. MSNBC talked all about invoking that against Trump for his perceived craziness or mental decline that they were talking about, which doesn't even hold a candle to the situation we're seeing with Biden. So I think it is not at all wrong to talk about those things. Nothing is going to be done about it. He is going to serve out the rest of his term, and his cabinet's not going to remove him, obviously. He intends to continue being as president, even if that just involves, sitting in his room and being mad about what his party did to him. So I have no illusions. He's not going anywhere for the rest of the term. He will continue to be the president. But if Republicans continue to make something about that, it seems perfectly fair to me.
Yeah, when Trump was in the hospital with COVID, no one was like, where's the president? Why isn't he in the White House? No, he had COVID. Biden's getting a totally different treatment. I think that's a bit ridiculous. The guy's sick. there's a chain of command. There are many advisors around him, many people he's appointed to help him. So I don't have that same feeling that you have Candace Owens saying, like, where is he? There's people saying he could be dead. We haven't seen him. He has no events. So very interested to see what he says tonight at 8 p.m., but I think he's very much alive.
Yeah, certainly. I think he's mostly keeping a low profile because he has been humiliated by his party and doesn't want to, this is like when you lose the school election for president of your class or something and are just kind of huffy the next day and don't want to show up. Like, I think that's the mood he's in, which I do not at all blame him for. But we will continue to discuss that. More Rising right after this. Kamala Harris is being slammed as a DEI hire by many Republicans. Now, in case you need a refresher, here's Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett on Tuesday.
Biden said, first off, he said he's going to hire a black female for vice president, and that he just skipped over. What about white females? What about any other group? When you go down that route, you take mediocrity, and that's what they have right now as a vice president.
So are you suggesting she was a DEI hire?
100%. She was a DEI hire.
And Republican Congressman from Wisconsin, Glenn Grothman, said this over the weekend.
But apparently they feel, or a lot of Democrats feel, they have to stick with her because of her ethnic background.
Apparently, they did not get the memo that the GOP seems poised to run away from making this about race. Well, race. Speaker Johnson spoke out against this line of criticism, as did former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Let's watch.
Two attacks I've heard Republicans give that are totally stupid and dumb to do is the DEI attack. Okay? The other attack that I would not do is saying that the president has to resign.
Interesting.
That would be an advantage for Kamala. Air Force One is very powerful when it lands somewhere. And you know what? Something will happen between now and the election, a hurricane or something else, and she'll be able to present herself as a leader. Or maybe there's some foreign policy. That is a mistake for any leader to go out and say that on the Republican side. This DEI, that seems like a petty. Look, I disagree with DEI, but she is the vice president of the United States. She is the former U.S. senator. These congressmen that are saying it, they're wrong in their own instance.
I am very clear and very consistent about this. I talked to the members this morning. This is an election about competing policies. It's not about personalities. We do very well comparing the records of Kamala Harris and the Biden-Harris administration and the Trump administration.
Morning Joe criticized the GOP's obsession with DEI. Let's watch.
In 1951,
I'm so
was he about to go into like a country club in like rural Tennessee there, like in 1951? Is he serious? If you are a black woman, then you're a DEI hire?
And he talked about mediocrity, and I would take any part of any Trump speech, any answer. He's either lying or he's not sounding fit. And also, I say that with a straight face.
So I actually disagree with everything Kevin McCarthy said there in his little interview, and it's a good thing he's not the leader of the GOP congressional delegation.
You think it's good
if he
to
feels
run on
that way,
DEI stuff?
I think it's perfectly fine. It's not to denigrate her, obviously, for her race or her gender. She is perfectly qualified. But the Democrats put themselves in the position when they said, or when the media made them say, we're going to pick a black woman to be the vice president. That gave rise to the idea that she was selected specifically for that job because of some demographic identity-based reason.
But
Thus,
if she's perfectly
the DEI
qualified,
criticism.
why does that matter? Why is that a problem if she's perfectly
If they had never done that and he had just selected her, do you doubt she was selected because she's a black woman?
She was selected because she's qualified.
She was selected because she's a black. I mean, Joe Biden said, I am only considering a black woman for this position because
But he
the media
didn't pick any black woman off of the street, Robbie. So why does it matter if she is a qualified candidate to be vice president that she also happens to be a black woman? They picked her, surely.
Was she the most qualified person?
Yes. That's why they picked her.
They picked her again because she was a black woman.
Why
they said they were picking her for that reason.
Here's the thing.
They said that.
Why can a black woman, in your view, not be the most qualified candidate?
No, they can be.
So who was?
Of course. I have no idea who's the most qualified person. But I know that she was picked for an identity-based reason because they said they were doing it. It doesn't mean she's unqualified. Or it doesn't mean So they have to be careful in what they say, and they should definitely not make this about race. They should not suggest that a black woman is unqualified. They should not do that. But it is fine to highlight the basic reality that she was selected for the vice presidential role, not because, and not actually because she had some massive base of popularity with women or with black voters. Joe Biden was himself more popular with black voters than Kamala Harris was. She was not demonstrating a natural affinity to speak on those groups or to talk to issues that matter to those groups. She was picked for a very skin deep reason. Like, that's just reality.
No, she was picked because she is qualified for the position. There were many black women they considered who were qualified for the position. They decided that she was the best campaigner and was the best person to choose as vice president based on the platform she ran on, based on her public. Among all of the people in that field of those who were aligned with Joe Biden's agenda, she was picked because she is the most qualified and has the ability to speak to an audience
Amy
in a way that Barbara
Elizabeth
Lee
Warren,
maybe couldn't.
Pete Buttigieg, and Bernie Sanders all performed better in the
But that's
objective.
your opinion.
No, it's not my opinion. It's that part of it is objective. They all did better in the 2020 primaries to determine who should be the Democratic nominee. They all did better than her. She was picked over them because Joe Biden promised to and was forced to make the promise that he would pick a black woman. So that's what gives rise to this criticism.
I don't think that's true. You can't really judge.
But they made it farther in the process. They did better in the primaries.
Right, but if they're not the most aligned with Joe Biden's agenda, why would he pick them? There are people like Youngkin. J.D. Vance is currently the least popular vice presidential pick at this stage in the race than anyone in history.
I don't think he was a good pick. I've criticized the choice. He was my least favorite pick of the choices made. I think there might already be some buyer's remorse because this is going to be a closer election, I think, now that it's Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden. And I think Trump could have done himself a lot of good by picking someone who is a little bit more appealing to moderate, without selling out the entire MAG idea and doing something like Nikki Haley, which I would be totally against, but someone who is maybe a little bit more reassuring to moderate or swing state Republicans than J.D. Vance, who's pretty hardcore on the MAGA agenda, comes across a lot like Trump himself. I think that was kind of a political blunder. And I'm perfectly willing to say that. So was I also think it was a political blunder to pick Kamala Harris back in 2020, even though she did not demonstrate a lot of appeal to voters, even relative to the other candidates in that race. So here we are.
Robbie, J.D. Vance is someone who is being criticized right now for his position on women. There's a reason that DEI exists, and it's to get a diversity of opinion. That is something that we believe valuable as a society.
I believe in diversity of opinion.
And there are many qualified people who could serve as vice president. Trump chose someone who is not qualified to be vice president, who is a junior member of Congress. He's serving his first term in public office ever. Kamala Harris has been in public office for many years. Barbara Lee was a candidate that, was
Barack Obama unqualified?
There are a ton of black women that they were choosing from. There are a ton of black women who are prominent members of the Democratic Party. Val Demings was another front runner. There was a whole list of people. Nina Turner would have been the vice presidential pick, in my opinion, if Bernie Sanders ended up securing the
Barack Obama was a one-term senator when he got elected to the presidency. J.D. Vance has, less political experience than is ideal. I'm not particularly going to defend him because he wasn't my favorite selection for the job.
But again, how did DEI get us a candidate that's more qualified than J.D. Vance?
What do you mean qualified?
DEI is a problem.
Just if duration of term of service is the only qualification, then they've swapped the most qualified person for a less qualified person because Joe Biden has been in government since the Stone Age. It's not just a case of who's served in government the longest. In fact, some voters. It's a subjective thing because the voters get to decide. And some voters actually think the longer you've been in government, the less fit you are to serve because you become captured by the whole thing. But I want to go to, you said diversity of thought. Yes, diversity of thought absolutely matters to me. Of perspective. That is real diversity. That is not necessarily captured and is sometimes at odds with identity-based or skin color or gender-based diversity. Like you could have, and this is what college admissions processes do, where they try to say, are you XYZ in terms of your ethnic identity, and construct a skin color diverse classroom where everybody thinks the same way because they're not actually because it's not a skin color is not a proxy for ideological diversity in a lot of cases. So if you want if you want to actually, attract people who think different ways and have different backgrounds, you can do that. But that's often in tension with just picking, we don't have enough. If you're a Native American, you get extra consideration. If you're a person of color, you get extra consideration. If you're
it's not extra consideration. It's that they were
that's how
formerly
DEI works in
ignored.
hiring admissions and why everybody hates it.
No, that's not how it works. That is absolutely not how it works. This is why conservatives across the board misunderstood the affirmative action case before the Supreme Court. Having Harvard University, in this case, for this example, be representative of the population outside of Harvard's gates, be representative of the proportion of America that is Asian, that is black, that is white. Harvard's admissions policies ensured that people who are in the top percentiles were considered across race. They didn't go and pull candidates that were not qualified, that were not at the same threshold. They made Harvard. No, they did not.
They absolutely did.
How?
Because they admitted people who were less qualified. They absolutely did, based on their test scores and based on their grades than the Asian people who applied. They turned down more qualified Asian people.
No, they didn't.
To admit that's what the Supreme Court found they did and banned them from doing. They treated Asian people like scum. Their view of Asian people is that they are some disgusting other and there's too many of them on our campus. It's objective racism. It's the way Harvard treated Jewish people for a long time until they stopped doing that.
What was at the heart of the Harvard admissions scandal was that they were giving Asian students across the board lower scores in the interview.
Personality defects.
Right, in the interview section. It had nothing to do with them being biased in test scores because everyone they admitted were at the top tier of test scores into Harvard University.
That's because these people's scores were better, so they had to come up
between the black students at Harvard and the Asian students at Harvard, Robbie.
They're absolutely.
That was not a part of the Supreme Court decision. No, it was not.
They were using the because they couldn't, if they were just considering the scores, they would be admitting too many Asian people in their view. They had to find something suspect with their personality to not admit them.
No, they can make a decision based on diversity requirements and take the top candidates who applied who are Asian and then say, do we want Harvard University to have a population of Asian students that is extremely high? Are we going to admit every qualified Asian?
What's wrong with having a population that's too Asian? Tell me, what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with having
what if
a
Harvard is
population that would be
100%
majority
Asian? Is that a problem?
But they
I don't
want
understand.
their student body to look like Harvard beyond Harvard's gates. And a big reason they
Why?
choose to do this is because a lot of qualified students that apply that are Asian are from foreign countries. And a lot of the students that apply that are black are from lower income areas and have to work twice as hard because the schools get less funding across the board in the United States than schools that are majority white. So the population of applicants in total is smaller than what we see proportion-wise than other racial categories.
Should DC's basketball team reflect the diversity of America, or should it just be the best people at basketball, and if that happens to be mostly black dudes who are 7 feet tall, that's fine? That would be my attitude.
Applying for college admissions is very different.
It's different because it's allowed to be explicitly racist and not include Asian people, would be my view.
They're not excluding Asian people. They have a
well, they're
higher
not anymore,
Asian.
'cause we
Robbie,
stopped it.
their Asian population of students is higher than the population proportion in the country. Likewise, their population of black students at Harvard University is lower than the population of black students. They already are underrepresented within Harvard's gates. They're trying to correct that with DEI policies. Similarly, picking Kamala Harris for president is not picking someone who is unqualified. They're picking someone who understands women's perspective. J.D. Vance said in a Fox News interview on reproductive rights, men want to be bred and we deserve to be pregnant. At a time when we're considering abortion rights and women's rights in America, having a woman run for office on the ticket is something that half the country, women, will look at more closely than someone like J.D. Vance who thinks he's entitled to get women pregnant. This is a huge miss, and that's why diversity of perspective matters to people in Harvard and to people across the United States.
All I'm saying is I think the Democrats and the media set her up for this level of skepticism when they insisted that the choice be a black woman, and so that will be the DEI criticism. I'm not saying she's unqualified. Qualified is really, like, I disagree with her. She's qualified to be president. So is Joe Biden. So is Donald Trump. So is J.D. Vance. I disagree with these policies and don't. It's a policy-based thing, but the I think people hate DEI and they hate affirmative action. Voters of California, her home state, very liberal state, have repeatedly voted to stop allowing the consideration of race in admissions and hiring for education, because this is not popular with even this is a 65-35 issue, and so they're going to continue to make that charge against
That's
her.
because people holistically don't understand what DEI is, because there's been so much misinformation in media, including what you've said about the admissions process at Harvard during this segment. I read all of the tables in that Supreme Court decision. I studied data and statistics, and all of the conservative commentary misunderstood what a proportion of the population is. Just because they are admitting a lower proportion of Asian students. If you get a pool of, say, 100 Asian American students, and you admit, say, 2% of that pool, let's say you're admitting 2 Asian American students, and you get a pool of 10 qualified black students, and you again admit 20%, you're still at 2 black students and 2 Asian students. The idea that because they were not admitting all of the Asian American applicants does not mean that they were discriminating against them. They had a larger pool to pick from because they got more applications from Asian students than black students. That's how admissions works.
We can make this real simple. They should not even ask them what their race is. It should be race-blind admissions that way, and they can just admit the most qualified people based on their test scores.
Robbie, when that
and
happens,
SAT
we've seen
scores.
discriminations on people's names on resumes because it's presumed that they are
Look,
black.
to redact their names. So just give this candidate number 7564XY2, and that's and here are their test scores, and just admit based on that. That's what I'm for doing.
All right,
Does
let's
that sound
agree
okay
to
with you?
disagree on this one. Yes.
Well, if that
everyone
doesn't
will
sound
get
okay to you,
nominated.
it's because you want to get
We'll
some
all
racial
wear
gerrymandering in it.
We'll wear gray blob coats and just have no names and have software that changes our name.
Sounds
our
good to me.
voices so
And
they
if
all
the
sound
entire
same.
population of Harvard is Asian under that scenario, I am totally fine with that, because it should just be totally merit-based, which is how most people feel. More Rising right after this. Remember hearing that Elon Musk supposedly said he would donate $45 million a month to Donald Trump? Well, Musk just told Jordan Peterson in an extensive interview on X that he never said that, and he tweeted this. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I am making some donations to America PAC, but at a much lower level, and the key values of the PAC are supporting a meritocracy and individual freedom. Republicans are mostly, but not entirely, on the side of merit and freedom. Musk said he created America PAC, led by consultants from Ron DeSantis' campaign, to quote, promote fundamental American principles rather than being hyper-partisan.
Now, Trump at his Michigan rally had this to say.
But Elon endorsed me the other day, and I didn't even know this, he didn't even tell me about it, but he gives me $45 million a month. A month. Not 45 million. Gives me 45 million a month. And I talked to him just a little while ago to say I was coming here, how you doing? And he didn't even mention it. He didn't mention. I mean, other guys, they give you $2 and you got to take them to lunch. You got to wine them, dine them. No, he's a great guy, he really is.
Now, Trump has criticized Elon Musk in the past, going as far as saying he came to the former president and sought his help and would have, quote, dropped to his knees and begged if that's what Trump asked. Doesn't seem like that's the case anymore. Now, right before Trump went on to say, Elon's giving me $45 million a month, this is great, he said, we have to make things good for smart people, in reference to Elon. This is like equating Elon Musk because he has a lot of money. He must be very smart. That's obviously not the case. I mean, Elon Musk is one of the biggest frauds in the United States of America, and Trump has been known to do this because he himself operates his business in a similar way to what Elon has. But I think a lot of working class people are sick of this narrative that the greedy billionaires are somehow also the smartest people instead of just ruthless frauds like Musk.
I don't think Musk is a ruthless fraud. I question sometimes his political judgment, and I haven't agreed with everything he's done with Twitter. I agree with a lot of it. He's built an extremely successful electric car company. He's built a private spacefaring company. He clearly must be smart. That doesn't mean he's right about everything, or you should automatically agree with him, or he's the best person to pick the president. But No, he does not just have a rich dad. He came from some wealth and turned that into $1 billion.
Through
you can't.
fraud.
You have to, not through fraud. Through innovation in the market. Through designing products that
But
people
he didn't
want.
innovate. He just owns the company.
But he didn't. He created the company. He
No, he
hired the
didn't.
people. Yes, he did. He
No,
created
he
Tesla.
bought
He
it
created
from
SpaceX.
Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpentin.
And he turned it into. I'm not saying he's doing the engineering, but we should not imagine that anyone could have done that, or I could have done it, or you could have done it. He clearly has some. I think it is a huge mistake to pretend that he's just an idiot and he magicked his way into this position of wealth. But if you want to say that, go ahead. He clearly possesses some degree of savvy and business expertise and technological wherewithal to build an incredibly successful, multiple successful companies and become a billionaire. Again, that's not to say that he's right about everything. There's plenty I disagree with him on. But now he's saying, so the news that he was going to give $45 million to Trump is apparently not even true. I don't know who originated that, but he says he was giving less money, and it's not specifically to Trump. It's to support these principles that he thinks Republicans mostly, but not entirely, align with. So he has, of course, endorsed Trump, and I have no doubt he's behind Trump, wants Trump to win, and is helping Trump. But the level of commitment, I guess, was exaggerated.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk saw that Trump is likely to lose now, and he decided to pull that money. But I think Trump's point still stands, that he wants to make this country good for who he believes to be smart people, which tends to just be people with billions of dollars. So yes, he fundraised with some money from his family. His family's from South Africa. They've profited greatly off of the exploitation of the South African people. And he had a little bit of money to start a business in the 90s when the internet was very new and there was this prospect of online banking. And he started a business that was so horrible that you could withdraw money from people's accounts simply if you had their account number. It was near failing, but PayPal wanted to purchase some of the software infrastructure that was not developed by Elon, but his business partner. And so he sold the company not because it was a great success, but because PayPal wanted the domain and didn't want competition. So he sold it for $22 million. And then he used some of that money to purchase Tesla from Eberhard and Tarpentin, the founders of Tesla, who created the initial models for the electric cars. Then he went to Daimler and he said, can I have an investment in this great electric car company called Tesla? They made Elon the CEO because he was willing to be the spokesperson, and the other two were the brains of the operation. So he's starting to wheel and deal. He goes to the Department of Energy and writes on his application for the loan that he already has a big investment from Daimler. So they say, well, if you have this investment behind you and you have this plan, let's give you all of this money. So he got the loan based on a lie, based on fraud. Then he said, I got the loan from the Department of Energy, and then Daimler gave him money. This is how he got the initial $451 million that started Tesla and made Tesla what it is, on fraud. And there were other car companies with more successful electric vehicle models, but without the capital investment that was based on a lie. And they did not get those loans from the government. So Elon built an empire on public subsidies.
What you mostly described, I'm against public subsidies for Tesla, for any other energy company. They should not do that. We should not subsidize green energy. I wish the Biden administration agreed with me, but they don't. In fact, Kamala Harris is even more in favor of subsidizing all of these kinds of things than Joe Biden is. Is going to be massive subsidies for industries that haven't proved that they can succeed on their own. I agree with some of what you've said. Now, some of that was good business sense. You're describing. It doesn't mean he's stupid, by the way. I mean, even fraud and stupid are different things. Like, he clearly, in a very savvy and smart and sophisticated way, navigated
making the electric cars, the ones doing the innovation.
Yeah. Okay. There are different level. You can be the technical expertise required to make the product is also very impressive, but you also need someone to run the business and steward the business and make good financial and business decisions. Not all of them were smart. I think the most impressive thing about Elon Musk is what he's done at SpaceX, which you left out of your little analysis there.
I don't think it's impressive to pay a bunch of people to make a rocket that fails at every launch. It's been a huge waste of money, just like Tesla has.
It was supposed to fail.
So I think a successful business
It didn't fail. It was successful. They are
has a
innovating.
Lot of
we're going to have if we're going to have a Martian colony, it's because of Elon Musk's innovation and leadership.
Well, the working class starves here on Earth. Yes, very useful. Now, Ford had
it's
successful
like a Luddite
models.
attitude.
electric
Oh no,
cars.
we can't build nicer, better, more impressive things because some people are starving.
It is a smart business decision to not invest in production of vehicles if you haven't created a good model or a good blueprint for electric vehicles. Tesla cars die at a very fast rate. The self-driving feature has been a nightmare. They're prohibitively expensive for a lot of people.
You're not going to get any disagreement with me on that front. It's Democrats who are cramming these things down our throat.
They make the majority of their money
on television,
off of selling carbon credits.
When asked about the gas crisis, inflation, all the problems, Democrats say, oh, just get an electric car. It's so bad. They're spokespeople for this entire movement. So yeah, I agree with you, but that's fine.
And they want you to
when
buy
this
an
technology
electric car
can
that is
succeed on its own.
So Tesla makes most of their money not from selling these cars because they are not successful, and he's not a successful businessman. They make their profits through selling carbon credits. So if Elon Musk was a successful businessman, he would have had a product that was worth selling. Tesla is not a profitable company thanks to them selling electric cars. And I think Donald Trump wanting to make America a good country for people like Elon Musk tells you everything you need to know about him and how he stands with the wealthiest people who are robbing us of public funds that could have gone to better use, to a product that's more valuable to the American people.
On that part of it.
And instead he's saying he's making things great for the working people, which is obviously not what he's doing.
Donald Trump can make things great from the working people and for the business climate by not subsidizing industries that can't succeed on their own. Let's not subsidize any. So you're agreeing. You're saying there should not be subsidies for green energy technologies. That's the position you're taking. That is not the progressive position.
I'm saying they shouldn't go to Elon Musk. I'm saying they should go to companies.
Ridiculous. You're saying I personally have a grudge against Elon Musk.
No,
so
I'm not.
And him alone should not get the green energy subsidies.
No, that's not
That's
what
how
I'm saying.
progressives are going to govern in this country.
No, because that's not what I'm saying, Robbie. I'm saying the subsidy should go to a company with a proven product, like many of the other car companies that were in the development stage and did not sell a product that they did not have yet in the way that Elon Musk did.
There should be no subsidies for anything, and if they succeed in the business market, that's fine, and if they fail, that's fine, and that's how it should be. And it's not going to be specific for or against Elon Musk, and if he makes a better electric car, good, and if he doesn't, oh well.
But Donald Trump isn't running on having no subsidies.
I wish he would, yeah. I'm giving advice to the Trump campaign. Let's get rid of those subsidies. No, you're right. Republicans, like Democrats, will subsidize some things, and tariffs, which both candidates support and are the worst economic policy of all time.
Subsidies are the problem here?
Yes, subsidies are bad. We should not do that. We should not pick winners and losers in the marketplace. That lends itself to all the corruption you don't like, where businesses have too much say over what the government does. That's how you end up with subsidies.
I would
Stop
say
picking
the
lizards.
Fraud is what's bad, because if we have no capital
fraud.
investment, the wealthiest people in the country will only allocate money towards what is profitable.
Correct.
And
That's what we
oftentimes
want
that are
to
not
happen.
things that the American people value the most. The
That's
money in the
literally how
society
profits
should go
derive
towards
from
the
the
things
people.
that people value the most. That's what an effective
That's
economy
what happens
would be.
in the market.
That is not what
people
we have.
value the most is how you make profits. So they
No, that's not how our economy works, though, Robbie.
It's not how our economy works because there's too much government control of the economy. Yes.
No,
there's
it's
too much
because
capture of it by Elon Musk type. We're agreeing. There's
No,
too many Elon
we're
Musk
not
type
agreeing.
people who can use their special relationship to people in government, like you just outlined, to get favorable treatment for their industries. Whereas if you just let it be a competitive market, you wouldn't have that happen.
Well, you're arguing against things that aren't my real opinion because you're not letting me finish my point,
Go ahead.
Robbie. So, no, it is not the wealthiest people in the country that are getting government subsidies. Government subsidies are going towards industries that are not surviving on their own because the wealthiest people who control capital in the country, people like the owners of BlackRock, people like Jeff Bezos, people like Elon Musk who have millions of dollars and billions of dollars, they get to decide what they're investing the money in. That is way too much control over the economic activity in the United States. They get to direct our resources, what they're investing in, putting those resources to use. They pay the labor power in order to produce these things. In a society that is supposedly a free market society, supposedly a democracy, you wouldn't have a handful of the wealthiest people deciding where all of our resources and labor power go. But that's what we have when private individuals who are very wealthy make decisions in our economy, and that's what needs to be corrected. That is why the framers of the Constitution decided that Congress could levy taxes in order to equalize that. Congress also has the power of the purse if those capital investors don't have the public's greater interest in mind, which they don't. They just care about accumulating more money, and that's why working people are struggling.
I have a feeling we're going to be having this argument a lot and for a long time, but I would respond that Congress deciding how to allocate these resources is the subsidy system, the system you were decrying a few minutes ago when it happened to benefit Elon Musk. I also don't like that system, leaving it to the market, leading people to let me finish now. Letting people, wealthy people, firms, control the resources that are under their purview and direct them in ways to maximize, yes, their profits. Often, not always, but often ends up providing a benefit to the American people, to the customer, in terms of the goods and services we purchase from these companies. Where it gets distorted and harmful is when those people are able to use influence with the government to cheat the marketplace, engage in fraud, or to structure it so that their products have some benefit or advantage in the marketplace so that it's not truly competitive, or they're just being subsidized directly, and then we're having products on the market that wouldn't have survived, like the electric cars. It's not the capital or the firm part that's the problem. It's it's their influence over the government, which we're like zigging and zagging. We're agreeing on aspects of this, but I guess we'll, as a libertarian and a socialist, we'll always disagree on the solution.
Well, this is why I take issue with Donald Trump saying he wants to make the government good for smart people like Elon. Because people lobbying Congress in order to make policy and decisions in the direction of their company, in the direction of their industry's interests, that is bad, but that is exactly what contributes to subsidies going to people like Elon Musk. He lied. He could have been prosecuted for it. He wasn't. Why? Because people like him pay public officials like Donald Trump running for president in order not to. That's why we have to end things like Citizens United and prevent these people from having so much money that it's bad for democracy. They have more power than the everyday people in our society.
Right, I agree. So we should end their ability to lobby the government, not end their firms, or not put their firms under more direct control of the government.
Well, they should not have the personal wealth in order to buy members of Congress. They should not be allowed to hoard.
No, they should not be able to buy members of Congress. They can have personal wealth. They just shouldn't be able to use it from that. Taking away their personal wealth is the exact. Then that's just the government picking.
They're not taking away their personal wealth. That wealth belongs to the workers at the company who made the things that they are selling.
Okay. All right. We'll have more Rising right after this. Vice President Kamala Harris got some good news the other day. There is a poll showing her beating Trump 44% to 42%, according to Reuters Ipsos polling. Also, 91% of Democratic voters said that they viewed Harris favorably, and that's compared to just 80% who felt that way about Biden, shoring up that base. A Trump campaign pollster, however, downplayed the results. In a memo to reporters, Fabrizio said, quote, that bump is likely to start showing itself over the next few days and will last for a while. Other good news for Harris, the poll found about 56% of registered voters agree with the assertion that Harris was mentally sharp and able to deal with challenges, while 49% said the same for Trump and just 22% said that about Joe Biden. Plus, money has been pouring in for Kamala. Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings donated $7 million to a super PAC that supports Harris. George Clooney, a big-time Democratic fundraiser, along with Melinda Gates, one of the world's richest women, have both thrown their support behind Harris. The Harris campaign reported raising more than $100 million in the first 41 hours after Biden announced that he was dropping out.
Now, there's also a PAC that was previously named Haley Voters for Biden, who expressed their support for Harris. Now, a law firm representing Haley's campaign sent a letter demanding the PAC, quote, cease and desist any unlawful use of Ambassador Haley's name in your PAC name. Haley told Fox News, quote, Kamala Harris and I are total opposites, and any attempt to use my name to support her or her agenda is deceptive and wrong. The PAC responded, writing, quote, our rights to engage with like-minded voters and encourage them to vote for Kamala Harris, the clear better choice for the country, will not be suppressed. Meanwhile, Trump confirmed he'll absolutely commit to debating Kamala Harris, though he said he's not thrilled about ABC hosting it. And he said he'd be willing to do more than one debate during a press call yesterday. So I am excited to see that. I want to go to this poll from Ipsos Reuters. Of course, there's a 3% margin of error. That's always important. This matchup head-to-head, Harris and Trump, is within the margin of error, but it does show a difference between the 44% tie we were seeing before she became the nominee. But also, we can't forget our boy RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy. When you throw him into the mix, Harris led Trump 42% to 38%, pulling her ahead, even considering the margin of error.
Yep, and Kennedy at 8%. I should say, so this is the most favorable poll result for her. I just pulled up Nate Silver, and he has a roundup of all the polls we have from this most recent couple days. That's the best result from her. A Marist poll has them equal, 42, 42, and 7 for Kennedy. And then in Morning Consult, Trump is up 2. SoCal Research, Trump is up 6. YouGov, Trump is up 2. Florida Atlantic University, he's up 6. Quinnipiac has him up 4. Harris X has him up 8. And Echelon has him up 2. On average, he's up 2.9 percentage points over her. So I think the bottom line...
But you have to look at the margin of error of those polls as well.
Yeah, I think... Look, I wouldn't trust any of these polls, the ones very for Trump or very for... I wouldn't trust them all at this point, because this race is so dynamic. We've just swapped out Biden for Kamala. The voters are just waking up to that reality. I'm going to want to know maybe 2 weeks from now, maybe more, when the race settles down a little bit, how people feel with respect to Kamala versus Trump once the reality has sunken in. It would not surprise me at all to see her polling better than Biden against Trump. I think the Trump campaign is prepared and is gearing up for this to be now a more competitive campaign than it was about to be before. When it was versus Trump, I think they were basically already popping the champagne bottles. And Kamala Harris is going to be able to mount a more vigorous challenge. I'm glad Trump has said that he does envision those debates taking place to run from the debates, even if he's able to use the excuse that, well, I agreed to debate Biden, I didn't agree to debate Harris. I don't think that would have been a good sign, and also he doesn't have any reason to fear. He's done well on the debate stage, so he should be looking to use that to his advantage. But yeah, Kamala is going to be able to campaign more vigorously, to speak more energetically, to participate in debates, and it's going to, the likelihood is that it's going to be a closer election, even though, as I've said many times on this show and will continue to point out, she is less of a tested commodity and hasn't had as much opportunity on the national stage. She hasn't run in nearly as many elections as Joe Biden has, so she has I think she's just a riskier, I hesitate to call her riskier because the risk of Biden, who was just losing so badly, staying, that was also a risk. But I think her ability to overperform and also underperform has not been really explored yet, and we're going to see.
Yeah, what we've seen so far is Harris on the campaign trail hitting at Project 2025. Trump hasn't said, this is my policy plan, this is what we're going to do. He speaks in a lot of platitudes. He says, drain the swamp, we have to change our government, the deep state, this and that. What's the plan to do that, though? You cannot just talk about issues without saying how you're going to fix the issues. That's what people are voting for. They're not just voting for, hey, this guy gets me. Although I'm sure some people do that. That's really not what we imagine when we imagine voting for a president. You vote for someone based on the course of action they'll pursue. So there's a void there that Project 2025 is effectively filling. So Kamala Harris is saying her vision and hitting back at Project 2025, saying it's extreme, outlining how they want to get rid of the Department of Education, outlining how they want to cut Medicare and Social Security.
If only.
And Trump is saying, I don't agree with this isn't my plan. But 6 of his cabinet secretaries are the authors that penned that 900-page document. So unless he comes out with an alternative, this is the de facto Trump 2024 agenda.
Look, Democrats have succeeded in demonizing Project 2025 and increasing its unfavorability ratings dramatically. That effort has worked. I don't know that that's going to end up impacting Trump very much because he's not endorsed it or said he's running on it. In fact, he's at every time said, I have nothing to do with this. And yes, of course, that's a suspect statement. I agree with you. I know from working with people at the Heritage Foundation that they do have influence over who staffs the Trump administration, and that some of the ideas, not all of them, but some of the ideas will make their way into, they will attempt to be implemented into policy. Although some of that stuff, they make it sound like it's sinister and new. Getting rid of the Department of Education has been a Republican talking point, has been something Republicans have discussed doing forever. I interviewed Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education under Trump. She was a Secretary of Education, and she thought the department should be abolished. It's a department that oversees how federal funding is administered to schools, and the conservative argument has been it's just bureaucratic waste. You could just write checks directly without having an entire department to do it. So if that's people think that's sinister. That's not akin to like abolishing public education. That's just saying the massive federal bureaucracy that handles this is not the best way to go about it. It's not a new idea at all. It's not coming in 2025. It's been talked about over and over again. It never happens. It won't happen this time either, because Republicans never actually succeed in cutting the government departments and spending that they promise to and that their voters want them to. Sadly, to my mind, but here we are.
Yes, the Democrats have successfully demonized Project 2025 by stating what is inside Project 2025. Which has been very devastating, because it turns out it's not
Well, in some cases they have. In some cases they're stating what's not in it. I just saw Jesse Singal, independent journalist, probably well regarded by many of our viewers, a friend of mine, used to write for New York Magazine and has his own podcast with Katie Herzog, calling out Molly Jong Fast, who on her podcast said that, let me pull this up so I don't misspeak, said that Project 2025. So Molly Jong Fast did a video on Molly Jong Fast is a liberal journalist on MSNBC a lot, or CNN. She's on MSNBC and CNN, and she said in a recent video that she bragged had been viewed like 500,000 times or something, that in Project 2025 includes a plan to end no-fault divorce, a complete ban on abortions, and banning Muslims from entering the country. That's what she said. Jesse Singal fact-checked it by reading Project 2025 and said it does not call for any of those things. She then just edited those parts out of the video.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it does not call for ending no-fault divorce, which is
a lot of the advisors of the projects call for no-fault divorce. Trump has proposed a Muslim ban himself. They've talked about, Trump didn't deny in the debate when he was directly asked if a bill comes before his desk banning abortion on the national level, that when Joe Biden said Trump would sign it, I would not. Trump did correct that. So I think all of those three
Trump
things,
has said
whether or not
there
they're in
would
that
not be a
document,
national abortion policy.
But the thing is when he had the opportunity to say, no, I would not sign that, he didn't say anything at all. And I think a lot of women are looking for him to indicate, no, I would not sign that. I'm not for a national abortion ban. And he didn't take the opportunity.
It's not going to come across his desk, though.
How do you know that?
Because it would be filibustered by the Democrats in the Senate.
In a world.
There's not 60 votes. You would need to have a national ban on abortion at the national level to have the president sign it. You would need the Republicans to have control of the House and a 60-seat majority in the Senate and the presidency. They don't have any of that. This is not going to happen. Not going to happen.
In a world where it did, I think people want to know what Trump would do. They want to know what the president would do in that situation, given the circumstances that many states have had these trigger bans where they're very restrictive. There's not exceptions in some states for rape and incest. We've had thousands of women, tens of thousands of women traveling across states for abortion. It's very expensive. This is an issue that a lot of voters are looking at. And the no-fault divorce thing is kind of ushering in this era of putting us back to almost the women's suffrage era. We talked to a woman on Friday from the South Carolina faction of the Republican Party. The lone three women that were in the Republican Party in the South Carolina legislature were pushed out by male primary challengers. Why? Because they decided they would not vote for the very restrictive abortion ban. This is an issue that a lot of women care about, even conservative Republican women. And I think having people like Vance say that men deserve to be pregnant, we have a right to be bred, and that they're taking away women's rights.
Men can't be pregnant, I don't think. You mean men deserve to get their women pregnant?
Yeah, I think that's what he means by that. And so,
men deserve to be pregnant would be kind of a progressive take or something.
It would be a progressive take, and maybe that's why he's so unpopular. But yeah, I think that kind of rhetoric of like, you can't get divorced, you have to be essentially the
I don't agree with any of that.
Husband.
I don't agree with any of that,
But if
and
Trump
I don't think it's good to run on it, and I don't think Trump agrees with it either, and I don't think he's running on it.
But he doesn't have a policy plan, and so that void's being filled by his former top advisors and the Project 2025 people and conservative think tanks.
I think that's some wishful thinking on Democrats' part. He's running on. He returned the abortion issue to the states and is running on keeping it at the state level, where there is for states to come up with some kind of consensus or go their own way. That's what he has signaled he should do. That's what I personally support. So we'll see.
So Vance's direct quote is, men want to be bred and deserve to be pregnant.
Men want to be?
Maybe he's pro-trans, Robbie.
I don't think. Okay.
Maybe that's why he's wearing eyeliner so much these days. But I think that the debate is going to be a point where Kamala Harris needs to say, do you support this or not? What do you believe should happen with the abortion ban? Should it be only the states deciding?
Yeah,
or
she
not?
should ask him about it.
Do you support a ceasefire in Gaza? She should just straightforwardly get
Does she?
commitments so people know what they're voting for. Because
Sure.
Trump has just let this void be filled by his former advisors and conservative think tanks. And I think the American people are slowly starting to realize that they're not totally in love with Project 2025. And he's got to put something else forth if he wants to keep his vote share.
Yeah, it's not his thing. American people do not like it. They don't even know what's in it. They would like some things in it and they would dislike others, just like I like some things in it and I dislike others. But maybe we'll take a closer look at Project 2025 in the coming weeks. But that does it for us today on Rising. It was a spicy show. We had a lot of arguments.
Spicier than usual.
I liked it. It was fun. I know our viewers appreciate.
So bratty.
Oh my goodness. Our viewers appreciate a good debate and a good argument. So I'm glad that we can have that dynamic as well.
Yes, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen on the go, we are available wherever you get your podcasts.
And we'll be back right here tomorrow. Same rising time, same rising place. See you then.
Bye, y'all.